Hello, everyone. So I had some thoughts. It's just the start of the afternoon. We just all ate something. We are tired. So I thought about just leaving the slides like this, and I do an app, and you just read my slides, and then you ask me a few questions. Yeah? Joking. So someone suggested that I release the 4.2 version live on stage today, but I have trouble with the Wi-Fi. My computer is kind of dying today, so I will not push the limits of this, and I will do the release just after the talk, I promise. So today we are together to celebrate the 10 years of API platform. So thank you very much for everyone for joining here to this conference. So a big round of applause for yourselves. My name is Antoine, just like Clémentine presented, also known as Seyuka. I'm the API platform release manager for 2 years now, something like that. I'm also a maker, a builder. I love everything about electronics, mechanics, and stuff like that. And obviously, I do programming as a day job for almost, maybe more than 10 years now. A bit of a retrospective about the... Oh, hello. Here it is. A bit of retrospective about the past year. So last year I was presenting to you the version 4.0 of API platform. Since then we merged about 600 commits that represents about 200,000 lines of code, and there were almost 300 new issues opened on the repository, of which we closed almost 2/3 of them. So huge work this year. And to give you an idea, this represents about a little bit less than a full-time job for one developer. And for that, I want to thank Letiel.com. Big round of applause for Letiel, please. So Letiel gave me the opportunity to do this as a day job. Obviously, I also work with clients. I've met some of you today with who I worked with. But Letiel is really the main sponsor behind this event, behind FrankenPHP. So huge shout out to them. Now, let's get into the topic, API Platform 4.2. What we are going to see today is a little bit of FrankenPHP, a word about state options. I'm bashing you with state options for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now. Maybe this is the last time I speak about that. Query parameters, performances, Laravel, OpenAPI, and JSON schema, and etc. The goal is to present to you a bunch of new functionalities that are coming to this new version. Let's start with metadata. So, as you all know, when you create an API with API platform, what you do is create an API resource, and behind that, we have what we say it's the metadata of your resources or of your API. We have a new way to declare metadata, which is actually with a PHP file. So this came from the Symfony world. People start creating configuration using PHP. So we also provided this to API platform, thanks to Loic for that. And Loic also added something else. If you want to programmatically change this metadata, you had to write what we call a metadata factory. And this can be quite a lot of boilerplate code, especially when you want to change a small thing inside an operation or inside a resource. And now you have this as resource mutator or as operation mutator attribute, and you can create this operation mutator interface. You see, either I get a resource here, I can change an operation, remove an operation, or directly work on a single operation and changing some option. Quite handy, especially for the Cilius bundle. So this was actually why it was created for. And if you want to know more about the Cilius bundle, there is a talk later about that in French. So now, the next part, and I really, really enjoy this one. I think I've been working on filters since forever. I think the first time we had filters on API platform, there was an issue to create an RFC around filters, and actually it's open since almost 10 years. And the starting point, at least for me, was that I introduced 8 years ago the API filter annotation. So attributes weren't even a thing back then. What this API filter does is that it allows you to, on a single resource, to declare, yeah, I want to use a date filter on this property, that date property. Behind that, this actually declares a service, a Symfony service, and tag it as an API platform filter. But this filter has lot and lot of responsibilities. It describes documentation. It handles the SQL query. It can act on multiple properties. And actually, we have lots of users that came back with issues saying, hey, I added a search filter on a date. Why doesn't it work? Actually, the search filter works only on strings. Does it? So that's fine. 8 years old code is fine, and this is why open source software is constantly evolving. And actually, Robert Cecil Martin said in this single responsibility blog post, gather together the things that change for the same reasons, separate those things that change for different reasons. But as long as you didn't found those reasons, then you cannot separate them, right? And I think that 8 years of experience is really nice to see, okay, what's wrong and how can we improve that? And this is actually what we did. If you like design patterns, there is a talk about that by Smain later. And back to our filters, we actually can now gather these responsibilities and try to split them. So we have documentation, we have transformations, I will probably get into that back later, validation, and the actual filtering of data, which is the SQL query. This is on purpose, it's really small, don't try to read it, it will hurt your eyes. The current interface of a filter has a single method named getDescription. And for starters, this was quite fine because, yeah, we describe the filter if it's required, if what type it is. But then we introduce things like the strategy, but the strategy should be for the filtering the actual SQL query. It has nothing to do with documentation, and so on, so on. So what we did is that we have this first interface, which is JSON schema filter interface, that allows you to just declare how is your JSON schema attached to a given parameter. Note that when you type this JSON schema as a string, for example, we will infer that type, and we will say that in PHP, the type we will get should be a string, and we will also try to validate this type. It works for many, many use cases, like if you say that my schema is an integer, then we will assume that the value you want in your filter is an integer. The second interface we introduced is this OpenAPI parameter filter interface, because often the parameters you want to change how the documentation is after. And this is quite upper level of change. And actually, if you don't define the JSON schema here, you will get the JSON schema from the first interface, okay? But you can also override the JSON schema for the OpenAPI specification. Last but not least, filtering. For this, we kept all the interfaces that are available today, So you have you're used to this. So there is one for ORM, one for ODM, one for Elasticsearch, etc., because they are really storage specific, right? And now you see this is a filter that you can now create in API Platform 4.2. It has no constructor because we want to avoid using dependency injection inside these filters. These should be only callbacks where you say, okay, my SQL query should look like this. Now you see we get the parameter. I will get back to parameters after. And then we create the end-where query. We get the value of the parameter, which is of the type that you expect from your JSON schema. Before API Platform 4.2, the type of a parameter was always a string. If you had a date in your URI, you would get a string that is a date, okay, but not a date time in PHP type. And these functionalities are all customizable on this parameter attribute. So you have two attributes, in fact, one for query parameters and one for header parameters, which are the most common parameters we use using HTTP. So you see there are a bunch of options there, and there are more options. I actually put 3 dots, go check the code. We also improved a lot the documentation to document all the cases of parameters declare. This is how we use such a parameter. So inside an operation, you have your parameters and you can put as many as you wish. For each parameter, you can specify a filter, but you don't have to. It's also possible that there are use cases without that. So you see here, I have a special placeholder, colon property, and there I can put properties to which this filter will apply. And this is really great because it separates the actual parameter from HTTP from the property that is in your entity or your domain. Oh, I shut down again. End of the conference. No. If you want to see more about parameters and filters, there is Vincent that gives a talk later about that. Actually, it's the main topic. He will showcase many new use cases with parameters. We, by the way, we work together and introduce these new filters. So I will not get into the details, go watch his conference. I just want to show one quick filter, which is the free text query filter. So this name doesn't come from nowhere. It's actually how Hydra implements that in their specification. And what is great with that is that you have a small queue parameter that can actually filter on a bunch of things. And you can now finally define that on your API, which was quite hard to do before that. Another example that is now possible is that we can create OR filters if we want. And this was also something that was requested 10 years ago or 9 years ago on API Platform. So we should be able to close this issue. Sadly, I don't have any Wi-Fi, but I will do it. I watched Jérôme talk this morning, which was about MongoDB, and he also showcased a bunch of stuff with filters, so I quite recommend to go check the replay if you want to know more about that. Last thing about parameters, then we go to another subject. This is also an interesting thing. So you see a link is also a parameter, but it's from a path. So we extended parameter inside link. And we have these providers. So it's not the provider that you're used to see. It's a bit more complicated. It's a provider only for that dummy URI variable. Oh, by the way, I thought I changed that. Oh, yeah, I have a better example here. So here you see, for example, the company. If you create this with API Platform 4.1, you will get the ID of the company. And now there is a clever way to say, read me this link. And actually what it will do, it will get the company resource or operation, and call that provider and gather back the data. So inside my employee provider, I can directly fetch that company, and it will be an instance of the entity. So this is a quite nice shortcut that is useful in many, many cases. Okay, we are done with parameters. Maybe next year there will be more. About OpenAPI, so I worked way too many hours on that, but I really enjoy the results. We finally mutualizes JSON schemas. So on the API platform, when you have, for example, multiple formats, you have one schema for JSON API, one schema for JSON LD, one schema for JSON, etc. And this is quite time consuming, so we actually now have one JSON schema, and we add the properties of JSON LD with a reference to this main schema. This brings a 30% lower file size on our OpenAPI specification with thousands of entities, is way less I/O intensive. And the problem with that is if you are testing in your code for a specific JSON schema, it will probably break with this new version. But the actual result of testing the data with your schema will not. Oh, fail. I asked the LLM to create an example, but not true. I prefer the app. So, about specification improvement, we also introduced a new tool. So previously we were using the Swagger UI validator, but it's not really up to date. It's missing lots of stuff. And I discovered PB33F, which I really, really, really recommend. They have some OpenAPI Doctor, so it's a web interface, I like the user interface, it's kind of nice. And they have really many, many features of saying, okay, you can improve the specification here and here. So we actually use that now as a validator, and we fixed a lot of inconsistencies. Performances. This is the topic I was waiting for. I think you all heard, you all got your elephants, so you know also that the PHP Foundation now officially supports FrankenPHP. And this is quite great, but until now, I never really tested the performances of FrankenPHP. Everyone says, yeah, it's fast, it's fast. Did you really check it's fast? So I did it for you. I compared Nginx with FrankenPHP, but I did not only just compare like that. I really digged into the server to find the best available configuration for Nginx and for FrankenPHP. So this is a basic, really small server, and you can see on the right, left, I don't know. You can see that I set the max children and the worker numbers. So these numbers are quite hard to find, but I really recommend that you find the sweet spot on your server, because this is the most performant way to use these servers. And what we discovered is that actually FrankenPHP and Nginx in thread mode or without the worker mode of FrankenPHP is actually the same. But the moment you enable this worker mode, and you see that on the green bar, is that you have really more requests per second, and it's actually way better performance-wise. So this is an example where you can find that example, on my GitHub on Cilius benchmarks. So this was on a Cilius page, actually, using these servers with a database, a MySQL database. This is the average latency, so same thing, you can see that it drops more than by 2 the latency of calls on the PHP web page. So congrats to FrankenPHP. In worker mode, it's way, way faster. And about FrankenPHP in production, there is Loic from Imagma that is giving a talk later today. So I recommend to go check how he configured his server, and if he didn't set the worker mode manually, you can tell him. So I will now speak about something else, which are state options. And actually, state options is quite handful first for querying sub-resources. I know you all struggle with the link from class to class, from property to property, because I struggle too. And the solution I found for that is to have a simple callback that you can use to actually define the links yourself. So you create the query, you say, here I want the employees of this company, and you know that it's a simple where clause. You don't need many joins or whatever. And actually, API Platform tries to do that for you automatically, but it cannot know all the cases by heart. So doing it manually is way faster and is making our life way easier. On state options, there is also another option, which is the entity class magic. So big thanks to Ryan to actually, he gave us the idea, he put it in a Symfony cast, so lots of people want to use that. But the problem there is with this entity class magic is that the class and the entity don't really match sometimes. Let's see more into the details how this looked like. The idea is that you have your API shape, and this is actually our best design strategies. And you say, this user API will gather its data into this user entity, which is persisted into a doctrine storage or whatever, Elasticsearch, MongoDB, etc. The problem is that you see my user API has username, but the user in database has a first name and a last name. So actually, we need a way to map back the data. So Ryan was actually either creating a provider that does the mapping by hand, and later on he created an object mapper that created that automatically, and he actually gave me the idea of creating components and trying to propose that to Symfony. So who heard about the Symfony object mapper component? Oh, not enough people. I'm joking. It just got out last minor and was experimental. But it will not be experimental anymore in a few months. I think the next release of Symfony is in a few months. And this object mapper component is now embedded into API Platform. So the moment you use an entity class with the state option and you map actually the data, it will be used and we can do the transformation like this. To give you an example, all I need to do is to add this map attribute from Symfony and the target of this entity class. By doing so, you can then configure the mapping between the two classes and you don't have any issue anymore. So I invite you to check the documentation about the object mapper. I don't want to get too much into the details in this conference. And about that, I talked about Loic earlier. He invited me to the Silus party in Toulouse this summer. And so a few months before that, he called me, say, yeah, Antoine, can you come? I want you to talk about Silus and API Platform. To what I answered, I never installed Silus, so what am I going to talk about? He said, install Silus and talk about your experience. Okay, why not? So I actually did that, and because API Platform offers the JSON LD format, which is really nice to gather rich results on Google, I thought it would be a nice idea to get a product page, and inside the product page to reuse the product entity of the API that's embedded into Silus and to show it in the front end. So the problem with Silus is that the entity, the product entity inside Silus, is not really compliant with how the product looks like on schema.org. And you need to respect that if you want rich results to be accepted by Google, Amazon, etc. So I created a new resource that's not yet tied to Silus. And I added the type. Next, I added a provider where I actually called the logic of Silus to gather the product from the database. And you can see here, I would like to zoom, I think it's a bit small. But the idea is that you really want to represent the schema how Google wants to, so you need this aggregate rating. And you see that I added some map attributes. Because inside Silus, I know that I can gather the data from average rating. For example, here it's get reviews or average rating. Average rating is inside Silus, but we need to name it aggregate rating dot, I don't remember. Anyway, we use the map attribute from Object Mapper to do this transformation for us so that it's quite easy to configure. Next thing, so this was really a big help to have this component. I showed the results here into the page. So all I did is actually create a twig hook in Silus and fetch the resource this time and actually serialize that to JSON. And oh, by the way, I have a good news. I put back the profiler, so if you were not using event listeners with API platform, you kind of lost this profiling of every step. And now you can see that I added them back. For example, we see the content negotiation, read provider, and serialize processor. And this is always going to be where we spend most time in an API platform request. And actually, we can now reduce this time using the JSON streamer component. So this is also, who knows about the JSON streamer component? Less people than Object Mapper. So this came out about in the same versions in Symfony. And what it does is that actually it yields all the characters of a JSON, and it's quite fast because it pre-computes your JSON shape. And so the caveat of this is that you need public properties. So you need a resource that's a class with public properties. Actually, with the Object Mapper, it's fine because you can map the data back into it, so you can try to use it. We integrated this into the last API platform version. To do that, we also had to introduce the type info component. So this is quite deep into Symfony. I won't get too much into the details. But this represents, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks of work just for type info. We put JSON streamer for JSON and JSON LD formats. I hope that in the future we will add more formats. And I know you're waiting for this. Is it better? Do you think it's better than the normal serializer? Yes? Are you sure? Yes, it's better. It doesn't look that much better, but it's because I was using a really small resource. So the bigger your JSON is, the bigger the impact will be, okay? This is already 32% more requests per second, which is a lot. This was tested on the same benchmark as you saw before, so the same Silus API, the same servers, with FrankenPHP in worker mode, okay? To enable this on your API, all you need to do, quote, all you need to do is to add the JSON stream to option. But obviously, if you have getters and setters, just forget, you need public properties on the class. Okay? If you're interested into that, Matthias Harlow, which is the creator of the JSON streamer component, will give a talk only about that later today, just before the party. Laravel. We introduced Laravel last year, and since then we merged 124 pull requests about Laravel. We had about 100 new issues only on this subject, and we closed a lot of them. I think that today we cover about 80 to 90% of API platform features. I recently added the HTTP cache feature, and I want to give a special shout out to our top Laravel contributors. So big round of applause for them. If you're interested into how we deploy API platform on our Laravel cloud, we are lucky to have Joe Dixon from the cloud engineering team lead that will present that. So I think it's tomorrow. So I know you're waiting for this moment. Is it backward compatible? Can I do Composer update API platform Symfony? So you can't because I don't have any Wi-Fi and it's not released yet. No, actually, it's released in a beta version, and I will release that later. I think the main breaking change is about JSON schemas, but the functionality did not really break. It's just the shape of schemas that changed, okay? We have a bunch of OpenAPI defaults that changed, but I don't think it will break really your implementations. The parameters I presented are no longer experimental, so please use them. And the changelog was really fine-tuned so that you can get the best look at the new functionalities. I think I presented like 20 or 30% of the new features that was on this new version. So the next big thing is API Platform 5 that's coming next year, because now it's 4.2, in 6 months 4.3, and then 4.4 and 5.0. Our plans for that version is the deprecation of the API filter. I see all rolling eyes. Don't worry. We'll be really gentle with that. I know you are all using this. What I have in mind is to provide first a script that will change your API filter to the new parameters. We are going to keep the API filter attribute. We are going to keep everything. We are just deprecating in 5. And I think it will take quite some time before we completely remove that. I want more support of the JSON streamer, more tests, more bug reports, because this is a quite new component. And I think it can really improve the speed of your APIs in some special cases. So please try that for us. It would be really amazing. Same for the object mapper. On Symfony, I had already, I think it's out for a little bit less than 6 months, but we have many reports from users, new functionalities and stuff. So I put quite some effort into fixing them as quick as possible. And the introduction into API platform will also lead to new ideas and stuff. So what I would like for this new version is that the community, you bring also your improvements to this. So a big thank you to all the community for this 10 years anniversary of API platform. Thank you.